Diplomatic power plays are one of the most common things to do in global politics nowadays. Oftentimes, countries will threaten one thing to get a response out of another country, but not ever really end up going through with it. They simply want to see how the country's going to react. And the United States definitely does this, oftentimes in the Middle East, as there are such high tensions between us as well as that entire region. And so we can see that happening right now with what the U.S. has planned to do with the Baghdad embassy. According to a Wall Street Journal article from September 28, 2020, the U.S. Secretary Mike Pompeo recorded that on a phone call with the Iraq president last week, he threatened to pull the U.S. out of the embassy. This past Saturday, he confirmed that the U.S. would be pulling out of the embassy. And although it's too soon to determine whether the U.S. will definitively do this or not, we have to analyze how this potential action is going to impact the region as well as our relations with the country, forcing us to ask today's question. How will the U.S. pulling out of the Baghdad embassy impact relations with the United States and Iraq? This is a pretty simple answer here. It's going to increase tensions. It will increase long-lasting tensions between us and the region that's going to support all-out war in the future. And we'll be able to see this for three key reasons. First, we're going to take a look at how the current 2020 tensions have impacted this decision. Second, we're going to take a look at how this highlights U.S. hypocrisy before finally examining how this increases tensions with Iran specifically. So going into this first key area of analysis, essentially what we see here is that the current 2020 tensions between the United States and the Middle East have not been great. We didn't exactly start the 2020 year off on a good note with the Middle East region, because as an Al Jazeera article reports on September 28, 2020, in January, the U.S. killed the top military commander in Iran, Qasem Soleimani, within drone strike practices near the Baghdad airport. Essentially what we see here is that right off the bat, we had bad tensions with Iran, in addition to having strained tensions with Iraq, since, as previously stated, we were doing drone strikes and rocket tests near their area. In fact, the article goes on to mention that just last week, 5 Iraqi citizens were killed in a rocket test from the United States. They weren't part of a military and they weren't soldiers, and this greatly angered Iraq. So before we even announced we were pulling out of the embassy, we already had strained relations with both of these two countries. And an NBC News article from September 28, 2020 explains how the U.S. Secretary explains, and he announced that if targets against the U.S. presence continue to happen, we are going to respond with strong and violent action. So the Iraq and Iran countries targeting us based on what we've been doing to them has already increased tensions significantly before we even announced pulling out of the embassy. So if we really go through and pull out with the embassy, that's going to cause even more tensions in the region. So for us to understand the current and past 2020 tensions, now we have to take a look and understand how this is going to highlight U.S. hypocrisy in the region and how it's going to actually further tensions if the U.S. decides to go through with this decision. A Business Insider article from September 9th, 2020 explains that earlier in September, we took our 5,200 troops located in Iraq and pulled them out, so we are now at 3,000. Essentially, this goes against what the Pentagon is stating that we are trying to achieve with the region, because as a Real Clear Politics article from September 20th, 2020 explains, the Pentagon announced that they are still willing to pursue stability and prosperity within Iraq, particularly against ISIS. The U.S. and the U.S. administration has come out and claimed that we are still very for going against ISIS terrorist groups, and we are still very for that mission of promoting peace. Yet by pulling troops out and by taking us out of the major region that this is happening in, that's extremely hypocritical of the United States. Even though we are still claiming to go and help this region, we are taking ourselves out of the action, making it harder for us to actually go ahead and help that region. So overall, this is going to extremely highlight United States hypocrisy in a rather anti-American area, which is going to increase tensions between us as well as Iraq. But we have to understand how this is also going to increase tensions with Iran. So after we understand how this is going to highlight U.S. hypocrisy, if we pull out of the embassy in Iraq, this is going to be a rather good play with Iran. As previously stated, we are not on good terms with Iran, and Iran wants us out of Iraq. A Washington Post article from January 10th, 2020 explained that when we originally killed the military commander of Iran, they explained that a U.S. troop withdrawal would expose Iraq to Iran. If we completely pull out of that region, that's going to put Iraq more at risk. So in addition to already having bad tensions with Iran, if we pull out of Iraq, that's going to make the tension between Iran and Iraq even more strained, causing our tensions and our relationship with Iraq, as well as us, to be extremely damaged. But further, the aforementioned NBC article explains that this is going to cause a lot of pro-Iranian groups within Iraq, as well as Iran, an extreme advantage over the region. Overall, by us deciding to pull out of the embassy, this is going to give Iran more power. We are going to lose both diplomatic and military power if we decide to do this, which goes against what we are promoting and trying to help the region go toward, which is peace. Overall, this decision is going to increase tensions, not only with us and Iraq and the current tensions, but as well as it's going to give more power to Iran and highlight U.S. hypocrisy. So going back to the question today, how will the U.S. pulling out of the embassy at Baghdad impact relations between Iraq as well as the United States? It's going to increase tensions, and that's the short answer. We've seen this in three key reasons. First, we took a look at how current 2020 tensions have influenced this decision. Second, we examined how this highlights United States hypocrisy before finally examining how this is going to increase in tensions with Iran. So who knows? We'll just have to see if the U.S. decides to go ahead and go through with this decision.